Well, Audibles work in football. They also work in the career trajectory of Andy Bock, and he joins us today. This is someone who works with ESPN, CBS Sports Network, Fox, and Stadium. The list goes on. He is a freelancer, producer extraordinaire in sports television, has worked with ESPN, has worked Fox Sports Arizona, all sorts of different outfits. And we're going to tell his story and how he stumbled upon this business in a unique way. I'm Bryan Fenley, a national anchor at Fox Sports Radio, and I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. So we're going to point out inspirational moments in the career of Andy, and let's start at its beginning. Andy, you compare where you are now and what you're doing and the fun you're having. And I look at and I follow what you do, and I could just tell you're having a lot of fun. How do you compare that fun that you're having right now to the fun you were having when you were just out of college working in a bank?
Oh, it's not even close, man. And that's kind of what inspired me is, I think, as I told you before, growing up, just like so many guys, a sports fan. I love to watch them on TV. I love to play it. My entire free time was just built around sports. And, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to college, like a lot of people. So I just kind of said, well, I'll just get a business degree and then see what happens from there. And that kind of led to a job at a bank where I thought, oh, this is good. I got a good salary. I can buy a nice car. I can support myself. And then about 2 months in, I'm sitting at my desk and there's a big clock up on the wall. And I just found myself staring at it going, this is terrible. This is not going to work for me. So the story goes is probably against protocol. One of my clients at the bank worked at ESPN. So I started chatting with her and things just kind of continued from there.
So things did continue from there. And, you know, people have these ideas of what they could be doing at ESPN when they want to work there. But for you, getting that opportunity, it was humbling at its start. In what ways did you have to really start from the bottom?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I had to make a decision. I mean, I had to drop, a nice salary and a quote unquote good job and really take really a minimum wage job. And I had to beg my way in there because Bryan, I had zero television experience. I just thought, well, I'm a sports guy. This will work. But they're like, you kind of have to have at least a little bit of television experience because we got so many people who want to work here. So you got to have something to distinguish yourself. So the first guy that I was politely bothering to try and get me a job in there, kind of said, listen, Andy, I'm in the graphics department. You got to have some experience. If you really want to get in here, I can have you talk to my buddy Kevin. He runs the tape library. There's nothing special about it. It's kind of a down and dirty job, but it'll get you a foot in the door if you're interested. And I don't know if he really thought I'd be interested, but I'm like, heck yeah. Woke me up with Kevin. So I connected with Kevin. I interviewed with him. He's like, you sure you want this? I mean, you got a college degree and all this. I'm not sure. I said, Kevin, trust me, just please give me a chance. And so I started in the tape library, really just keeping back then it was a tape world and I just cleaned up after people. It was kind of a 9-to-5 job. So the best thing about it for me was I just thought, hey, I'm in the building. So I would do my job during the day, finish up around 5 o'clock. And instead of racing home, I would wander around and I would step into the control room where they were doing the 6 p.m. Sports Center. And it was just like a whole new world for me. I'm like, this is awesome. And being in the building, I'm like, someday I want to do something like this. And being an employee there, I'm like, this is gold. I'm just going to watch and learn and listen. And one thing kind of just led to another.
How did that one thing lead to another when you started out from where you were and you talked about this? And for you not to get dissuaded by the business from starting the way you did, but then how were you able to parlay that into your next opportunity and slowly make the climb?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, kind of just being in the building gave me a little bit of an advantage. There was a job posting board, and man, I walked by it 12 times a day, bringing my cart back and forth, from the production area to the library, and I would just stop and look. And every time there was a new posting, I'd see if I could remotely qualify for it. I mean, I still didn't have a lot of experience, and what I ended up doing, Bryan, when I was working in the tape library and kind of peeking in on sports centers at night, I got some advice from some good folks who I'll still never forget, and they said, listen, you're working at ESPN, but you're still not really getting any television experience. So why don't you go down to the local NBC or CBS or news affiliate and see if you can just beg your way into the sports department, just be an intern, just get anything, get some experience, maybe even go to the local cable access channel. I was living in Vernon, Connecticut at the time. And so honestly, Bryan, I did both. So a couple of nights a week, I'm down at NBC 30 in New Britain, Connecticut, and I'm just tailing around the sports guy, doing whatever, just trying to get a feel for live TV. And then I went to the cable access channel as well once a week, and we just worked on a project, and we had to put a little film together. So after a few months of that, I could actually go to somebody at ESPN and say, you know what, I'm serious about this. I want to make this a career, and this is what I've been doing. And I finally had enough on my resume to impress Louise McGrath, who I'm forever indebted to in the programming department. She's like, all right, I'll take you on as an entry-level screener. So my first kind of real job outside the library was screening taped shows before they went to air. Everything had to have eyes on it for, production glitches or whatever it might be. So I had to watch they were boring shows, exercise shows, and some really weird stuff, but I had to watch all that stuff. Make run sheets for it and just make sure it was good for air. So that was kind of my start into a little bit of the television part of it.
How do you turn a passion into something in which, and I hear this work ethic of yours, and I feel that in a business, in an industry like this, you need that, but that's not inherent in everybody, and not everybody in the business has that. Who taught you to put your name into something like ESPN, start from the bottom, and then go out there and do other opportunities outside ESPN to get that experience? I see in you this resounding work ethic, Andy, and I'm wondering where it originated.
I think most people, you take a cue from your parents. I mean, I watched my dad, get up before dawn every day and go to work and come home late and still have, time for us and do everything you needed to do to be a husband and a dad. So that probably started there. But then the second big thing for me was, I knew I was getting into an industry, Bryan, that a lot of people wanted to get into and would kill for this opportunity. So I'm like, I can't do any of this half-assed. This has to be all in, and I got to go above and beyond what might be, normally expected. Because if I want any chance to succeed, to get ahead, to get an opportunity, I got to get, and you got to be all in. And so I just put aside everything else in my life, and just really every waking hour, I dedicated myself to just learning what I could about television, pursuing opportunities. And when I got those opportunities, just spending as much time as I could in Bristol, just trying to better myself. And I don't think it's probably true of most businesses, but especially sports TV, again, where there's so many people that want to get in, like you can't let up. If you let up, you'll just get passed.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, if you let your guard down, somebody's going to step in and take that. Andy Bock is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. So as I learn about your life story, I hear about this work ethic, and I also see another common trait with you that it definitely is something that's been with you for your life and the course of your life. And that would be how you react to adversity. It seems like you always are that solution getter, finding a way, not being deterred, whether that's in your career rise, but also looking at 2009 when we had the market crash. And here you were put in a tough spot because jobs were getting cut. How have you, over the course of your life, Andy, taken things like that, hurdles, and then always had that positive approach where you just find a way around it and you get the solutions that you were looking for?
Well, at that point, 2009, I'd been in this business for 14, 15 years, and I had kind of just gotten my chance to get up to that so-called front bench where you kind of you aspire to. And boy, at that point, Bryan, I really didn't have a choice. Like, I wasn't going to go backwards. I wasn't going to try another career. So when I got that news from Fox Sports, though, back in 2009, everything had just cratered. And like I told you before, I was an expensive freelancer for them. So just a lot of us got let go. And I went from working every single day, as busy as I'd ever been, 175, 180 events a year, which is enormous when you're producing shows, to almost zero. And I'll never forget where I was when I got that call. And for a day, I couldn't breathe, right? Because I just didn't know where I was going to go next. But I settled down, I took a deep breath, and I just said, all right, I've got to reach out to my friends at ESPN, who I'd, kind of left when I went to Fox, but stayed in touch a little bit. So it'd been a while, but I reached back out to all my friends at ESPN and just said, hey guys, this is where I'm at. This is what I've been through. This is what I've done. And this is what I'm willing to do. And it really was anything. If anybody will have me on any shows, doing any role I'm in, because I'm kind of looking to regain my traction with ESPN. And the first I got an offer right away, and I got an email from Caroline Davis, and she's like, oh, "How'd you like to go to Australia?" And I'm like, "Australia for what?" And she says, "Well, tennis." I go, "I don't know anything about tennis." She goes, "It doesn't matter. We know you. We know you're good. You'll figure it out. And why don't you come along and join the World Tennis Tour?" And I did. And that was kind of my road ramp back into the ESPN world after that happened.
That's fantastic. Yeah, the tennis is something that I love in calling tennis matches for the USTA as well. And certainly, yeah, Caroline Davis is somebody who's well into the tennis space at ESPN. You also then made your way to, and we'll get into all the different, you've traveled a lot, you've lived in a lot of locations, but when you came to ESPNU and the SEC network in 2014, this was 5 years after you had rebounded from what was, you would say, I would think, Andy, one of the tougher times of your career. But if I met you in 2014, you were walking into the offices in Charlotte, ESPNU and SEC network. What is it like living in your world at that point in your career?
Career-wise, it was awesome. Like it kind of had always been my dream, I guess. If I was going to be staff somewhere, like ESPN was the place. Like, but why would you want to be anywhere else? They've got tonnage. They're the monster in the industry. So if I told my wife, if I ever had a chance to be ESPN staff again, I'd have to look at it. And at the time, if you wanted to be a staff producer with ESPN, you had to live in one of just a couple of places. It was Bristol, Connecticut. It was Charlotte, North Carolina, and maybe Austin, Texas, with the Longhorn Network were your spots. And so it was in 2014. I had been freelancing for 2 or 3 years for them and doing pretty well, but then everything kind of changed at ESPN as far as how they were going to hire people and pay them and all that. So my choice was really to take a small part-time package and remain living in Arizona, or pack up everything where we'd been for, at this point now, 15 years, raised all my kids there, and pack everything up and go to North Carolina. So my wife and I agonized over it for a week. And there were tears and there were hard conversations, and we had 3 kids at the time. And, but we ultimately decided to do it. And God bless my wife for packing up everything and agreeing to do this for me, because they all did it for me. Nobody wanted to move. We were really happy in Arizona, but I just said, you know what? I got to give this a try. And I told them, I said, we'll reevaluate it down the road. I got to do a minimum 2-year commitment. And let's reevaluate after 2 years. And so we did go to Charlotte. Professionally, it was great for me. Connected with a lot of great people, John Vasallo, Chris Farrow, guys you've had on here. Those guys were mentors and colleagues and bosses for me. And even still to this day, I love those guys. But personally, from the family perspective, it was tough. My kids were at those critical ages. My boy was going into high school. My daughter was in middle school. I had another daughter in elementary school. And personally, it ended up being a tough transition. So we decided to go back. So I went to all my bosses and said, hey, really appreciate this opportunity. I hope I've made the best of it. But for my family's best interest, we need to go back to Arizona. I need to have my 2 older kids finish high school where they started. It was too tough. So I said, you know what, I'll figure out the professional stuff on the backside, but I got to go. And they gave me their blessing, JV and Murph and Farrell and those guys. They said, hey, it's been great having you here. Sorry to lose you. But so they sent me off with a sort of a part-time package, which is better than the one I would have had if I never went to Charlotte. So I feel like I gained a little bit of equity there. And we ended up going back to Arizona, and I kind of went back to the freelance world. So I had my small package with ESPN, and I started working for other clients and building out the rest of my schedule back in Arizona.
Yeah, all of those other clients, and certainly you do with the Baltimore Ravens, you do their preseason games. We mentioned at the top, ESPN, CBS Sports Network, Fox, and Stadium. What is it about the way in which you work in games, the way in which you handle situations during a broadcast, that made you so endearing, looking at it now, to all of these different outfits and networks?
Yeah, good question. 2 things, I think. One was just always my approach. Being a freelancer most of my life, outside those couple of years in Charlotte, Bryan, I always approached any assignment or event that I got like it could be my last event, because literally it could be. It's not like, for the most of the part, I wasn't a staff employee. So I felt like if I didn't put my very best foot forward in every single event I was hired for, the client could just simply say, you know what, we're going to hire somebody else. And there would be no paperwork. They didn't have to fire me, go to HR. It was just like, you're not as good as we had hoped. And so I always approached every event like it could be my last. And like I had to prove myself every single time out. I never rested on, oh, I had a great show last week. Well, this is a whole new show this week. So I kind of had that approach. And then the second thing I think just is my number one thing in all the shows I do is I make sure that everybody is going to have fun, because we're doing television in the end. We're not operating on people. We're not on the front lines of law enforcement or anything like that. So we're just making television, and we take it seriously. Our goal is to do good shows, but I make it clear that I want people in the truck laughing during the show, and I want my guys on the air laughing as well. Because when we're all laughing and enjoying each other and having a great time, I think it shows up on the air and it makes for good shows. So I think kind of those two approaches have just led the clients that have hired me to want to hire me back.
The fact that you have, and we're joined by Andy Bock on Bryan Fenley, lived in, if I'm not mistaken, 6 different places in your life, traveling and working in different locations and then moving your family. How has being open to that change, being adaptable, working in different environments and living in different environments made you better at your job in terms of being versatile and evolving with whatever is thrown your way?
It's been a huge part, Brian, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Moving is not fun. I wouldn't recommend it for like a hobby or anything, but when you do it, I think it makes you resilient. And I instill this in my kids all the time. To just don't be resistant to change. And I think I heard JV say it on his podcast with you. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, because when you're in that mindset and that mode, like, you can meet any challenge head on. And I mean, live television, again, nobody's going to die, but there's a lot of challenges in different shows, and you run into different things that are out of your control, and you have to know how to react to them and how to push past them. So I think moving and going through the difficulties that entails, and even to this day, Brian, even though we went to Charlotte and went back, all 3 of my kids, I think, are much better for having gone through that move and gone back than had we never moved, because it was difficult for them. And they had to learn for 2 years to push through the hardships and some of the feelings they were feeling. And they got stronger and better because of it. So I'm glad that we went to Charlotte, and then I'm glad we went back. But moving has been a huge part of, I think, my success and just my family's success and our outlook on life.
How do you feel, or what would you say has been the hardest decision you've had to make during a broadcast on air?
During a broadcast on air, boy, I don't know if there is a particularly hard one. I think it's just the volume of decisions you have to make. And maybe I'm just so conditioned to be in that mindset, because literally, even when you don't necessarily know it, you're making a decision every few seconds when you're sitting there in front of a bunch of monitors, and only one monitor matters, the program monitor. That's what's going home to everybody. But you got 50 monitors in front of you, and your job is, with everybody in your team, to mesh all of these sources, these cameras, the audio and everything, into one screen and make the best possible show that you can. So I don't know if there's one decision over the years that really sticks out for me, but I think just the fact that when you sit down and you count down, and now you're on air for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever it might be, you're just kind of in that mindset of, okay, for as long as I'm on the air here, I have to make a lot of decisions. Not all of them are going to be right, but I've got to live with them, because once it's made, the moment is gone. There's no going back to edit it. So you just really hope that you make the right decision for the viewer and for everybody on your crew, because you're kind of the leader, and people are looking to you and your voice and your decisions to steer everything in the right direction.
What decisions do you make to make your on-air talent feel comfortable during a broadcast?
That's a good question, Brian. And I, as a producer, I've always looked at my number one job. The thing that's most critical from my seat is to make sure that my talent are in the position to succeed. And that includes all the days leading up to the event, not just the day of the event. So as soon as we get assigned the event, and I find out who my talent are and who my production crew is, I start a group text immediately and say, okay, guys, we're on this basketball game on Saturday, start in the group text. If anybody has ideas, thoughts, anything, questions, let's put it in this chat. And then you proceed from there to set up, whether it's Zoom calls with coaches, calls with SIDs, making sure you get game notes and articles and all the information you need, making sure everybody has film that they need to review and everything that goes along with prepping. And then on the day of the game, making sure just simple things like making sure your talent has the transportation to the venue, make sure they have a good parking spot, make sure everything is set at the announce table, that the headsets work, that your statistician is going to be good, that everything they need to succeed is there and they don't have to stress about it. And then even continuing on, if there is some stress in the truck, which happens, making sure that that stress does not get from the truck to the announce table. They need to just be shielded from that. And again, just if your announcers are in a good position to succeed and they're comfortable, most of the shows will end up being okay.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, dealing with the dynamics inside the booth, or inside the production truck, and making sure that they don't infiltrate onto the court or wherever you are, as far as where your broadcast location is set up. We are joined by Andy Bock. I'm Bryan Fenley. So you mentioned as well that in preparing for these broadcasts and we get the group text going, you want to make sure that, your talent has the film. If they're looking at a game and trying to scout out teams, that they have film of those teams, and they can ingratiate themselves, educate themselves on the squad, so that they are more informed during the broadcast. For you, Andy, how often do you run back the film of your broadcasts?
My own broadcast? Let's see. Years ago, I think when I was kind of just starting out producing, I would try to watch a lot of my shows. And even it was interesting when I was an early producer, I had some audio guys that would help me out and say, hey, listen, I can give you a program record of the game and your PL voice at the same time. So you can watch the game after the fact and listen to yourself and how you reacted to situations. Boy, was that surprising, because I mean, I guess I'm a pretty calm guy overall. I don't get overly excited. You have to take, the good with the bad, and you have to roll with stuff, and you can't get overly excited either way, good or bad. So that was kind of eye-opening to me, to listen to my voice during the show. But it helped me kind of fine-tune how I think about things, how I react, how I communicate to everybody on the show. So I did that a lot early on. I've kind of gotten away from that in past years, not because I feel like I've mastered it all. I'm always looking to learn, but I think now I spend more of my film time, and every week there's film time, just watching games of teams that I'm going to cover, so I can learn the teams, learn the players, learn their stories. It's funny. I'll be sitting there on a Tuesday morning in front of the television with my clicker, and I'm watching a football game, and my wife she's like, you're working, right? Yeah, I'm working. I'm doing film study. And she's laughing because my boss would kill. You're watching football and you say you're working. No, I really am working. I'm studying it. I'm not doing this for fun. But film work, both of those instances are things that have really helped me along the way and continue to do so today.
I want to leave you with this, Andy. And you said that, you had an opportunity to get some of your own film with your voice over it while you were producing, directing a game, and how interesting that is to hear the decisions you're making in real time as it relates to the programming. If you were to look at what you've done, the body of work, and narrate over it and say how you did it, how would you, when you look at everything you've done, reflect upon the persistence that it took to get to this stage? And how satisfied are you with yourself and how you've handled everything over all these years?
I would say overall, I'm pretty satisfied. I mean, obviously there's, we all aspire to do bigger events, different events. But I'd say I'm really happy with my career, Bryan. I'm very blessed. And I would say, the reason any success I've had really is because, and I've heard people say this on your podcast before, is just I make a huge effort to surround myself with not only talented, smart people, but people who are really invested in the product, want to do well, but also have fun doing it. So they kind of think the same way I do. They're not going to go halfway on anything. They're going to put in all the prep. I don't want anybody on my shows that's not invested in the prep. But I also want people to know that when they get in the truck with me and my director, that we are here to not only do good television, but have fun. And I think that's kind of been a common thread, no matter what client I'm working for, no matter what sport it is, what season it is. I think it's a big reason why I've had whatever success I've had is because I kind of have that attitude with the groups that I lead.
Yeah, I see fun from the start of your career. Maybe not as much fun as a banker, but maybe
No,
a little bit. But I think the fun
more.
grew with that decision you made. Yes, a little bit. And by you taking a chance on yourself, it has allowed you to have so much fun, so many rewarding experiences, and many more to come. Andy Bock, you can find his work all over the place: ESPN, CBS Sports Network, Fox Stadium, the list goes on. Also with the Baltimore Ravens and their preseason games. This was a lot of fun, Andy. I'm Bryan Fenley. Appreciate you opening up and taking us through your story, unorthodox journey, but you're reaping the benefits of it now.
Absolutely, Brian. Appreciate you having me, and love the series, and keep it up.